In today's video, I am going to be talking about how many defenses that you need for each and every basketball team. Now, this was a conversation that I had a little while ago. A certain coach or some, actually, I would say there was 4 coaches over about a 1-year period that couldn't believe that I used more than one defense with my team. See, everyone thinks that I either use the perimeter defense that I sell in the description below or my unbeatable defense that I sell in the description below. There's a new book called The Deadly Defensive Strategy that is down there as well, which gives you a couple of different zones and plays, defensive plays that I like to run myself. Now, when it comes down to those books, sure, I'm selling an individual play, and then a group of plays. But I don't just live on one defensive strategy. Let me explain. So first off, let's say we're talking about man-to-man defense, where you've got your man guarding the ball. These next 2 players are going to be playing in the gap, roughly 1 big step away from the man that they are defending. And then 4 and 5 have help, and they are generally 2 big steps away from the man that they are guarding. So if ran correctly, this is one of the harder defenses to try and play against because it's man. We start having guys who rotate, cut off gap. This can be a kick out. He can stunt and recover quickly. There's always generally constant pressure in man-to-man. Another thing about man-to-man is if you are to teach your team man-to-man first, then teaching zone is actually very, very easy, especially if you use my strategy where you go from man-to-man to run and jump into trap zones as well as different types of zones as well. For example, my Unbeatable Basketball Zone Defense book that is down in the description. So, for example, let's say player 1 dribbled past half, and we are running run and jump, which is on 2 dribbles. Now, I personally run and jump different. I don't go by dribbles, I go by something else, and obviously you can get my Deadly Defensive Strategies book down in the description below to be able to see how I run my run and jump. However, let's say we are running run and jump. Well, the blue team took 2 dribbles. Now we are playing run and jump. The idea behind run and jump is generally not to run it from the middle because this gives it or at least this player, a very easy time to pass out of it and leaves multiple players open and long distances to sprint and then recover. Generally speaking, you would run this dribbling up the sideline. Let's say player 5 has the ball, and then you go and trap the sideline, and then you've got these 3 players zoning up basically inside of a triangle. So with run and jump, it's kind of a fun little strategy that you can run in the full court or half court that still incorporates man-to-man, but also incorporates zones. Like this, basically a triangle and 2. Then I like to get into these what I call traditional zone defenses. For example, this one's a 2-3. That way we kind of understand, oh, hey, I'm guarding an actual zone and not an individual man. And then, obviously, you've got your rotations. They have to understand that they have to move within their zone. And then going from a traditional zone into, let's say, a half-court trap. So, for example, we would have a 1-3-1, and players 2 as well as 4, they are going to have, generally speaking, longer arms if you wanted to run this correctly. Player 3 is generally going to be your fastest player. Whoops, I spelled that incorrectly, but your fastest player. Player 1 is going to be generally your best defender. So player 1 needs to be somebody who can move players to the left or right side so that you can trap that ball in the corners. And player 5 generally needs to be a bully. So he generally needs to be pretty big, but because you're running a trap, he also needs to be fast. If he's one out of these 2 things, he's all set. If he's both big and fast, it's even better. Now, the idea behind having all of these different defenses is even if you run a zone that is practically unstoppable, you're always going to have teams that are going to try and figure it out, and they might just stumble upon one simple play that might be able to beat it. Now, if that happens, you're cooked if you don't have a secondary defense. So, having a man-to-man and maybe a zone is going to be preferable, because then you can kind of switch between the two, because when it comes to offenses, a man-to-man defense reacts differently than a zone. So that's why teams will have a zone offense and a man-to-man offense. Now, I personally prefer to run trap zones and a man-to-man. That way, if I want to try and put pressure on a team once they get past half, I will run into a half-court trap. If I want to kind of lay off and then try and have them beat me somewhat in a one-on-one game because maybe they don't necessarily screen very well, then maybe I'll play a man-to-man. So you always want to play with your strategies and have at least two different types of defenses, generally if you are allowed to. I understand that there are some leagues that do not allow zones, that is with younger teams, but you can make a man-to-man defense react very similar to a zone where players can sag off and cover keys and then recover quick if there's other teams that generally just cannot shoot very well. However, this is generally where I would be looking at how many different defenses I would be running. So if I was looking at that 6 to 9 year old age group, I would be probably looking at in the range of just running man-to-man. Now, if I was, let's say, coaching this team for 3 years, I would eventually still run man, but I would run a defense called run and jump, and I'll just put it like run/jump. Now, from the age groups of 10 to about, I would say maybe 13, well, I'll put YO for a year old. And from there, I would be looking at maybe running a man-to-man, but also I would be looking to run maybe run and jump, so R/J for run and jump. And then I would also be looking to run either something crazy, like my unbeatable defense, so I'll put crazy, because that defense is pretty crazy, because basically what you're doing is you're trapping the corner and doubling the low post and leaving single coverage from the free throw line and up. So any zone offense that's trying to push the ball into the corners or the wings or even the post, this defense is going to absolutely destroy them, which is most zone offenses, at least what I see. I would say like 80% of them try to run through the corner or the post. And then I would also look to run a traditional zone, maybe a 2-3 or a 3-2 or whatever. From 14 and up, I'll just put an arrow for up, I would be looking at running something that is going to really kind of mess with teams. I personally don't like the full court presses all that much. I would run full court run and jump. That's just how I am. But I feel like once you get past 14 or 15 years old, most teams are, or at least should be, able to beat a full court press extremely easily. I've got highlights of my 11-year-old team that I coached a few years ago on my channel that teams try to full court press us, and it's just like us going through water and scoring on the other end. Like, your team should be able to figure things out. It's not that hard to beat a full court press. So I personally just don't press. I just go half-court traps and then run different types of zones and mans. So I would be looking at traps, but in the half-court. I would be looking at man, because I feel like man with a little bit of run and jump, I'll put R and J, is pretty deadly in its own. And then I would run maybe 1 to 2 traditional zones. And of course, I would run at least one crazy zone. You can run something like my unbeatable defense, or you could run a box and 1 or a 1-3 chaser or triangle and 2 or whatever you want to run. Something that's crazy, but this is essentially what I would be looking at when it comes to different defenses to be able to run. Anyways, I hope that this video has helped you. If it has, hit that like button and subscribe. If you want those books, go check them out in the description below. And I'll see you guys again in my next video.